themselves and their families. So it was truly difficult, and they were forced to march and to attack, and many of them were killed by their own members, because the Venezuelan and Cuban and like guerrillero militia that was there, they were the ones killing Bolivians just to pretend like, oh, the military is killing the cocaleros. But actually, the military didn't have lethal arms at that point. So it was impossible that they were killing them. And then they did studies, and they found that they were killed through from behind, through the bullets coming in through the back of their heads and all those types of things. So that was proven at the end as well. So Evo's whole plan didn't really work out. And so I just wanted to point that out. But so from Mexico, Evo incited violence. He claimed that there was an immense coup against him. And he truly violated asylum laws. Mexico didn't do anything about it. They let him violate the laws of the international laws of political asylum. And of course, as an asylee, he's not allowed to give political opinions. He's not allowed to give statements about his own government or about the government in Bolivia. And he's not allowed to incite violence. Yet he was doing all of those things about every 5 minutes with his tweets, because he's become quite the ardent tweeter lately. And so on top of that, he was inciting terrorism and the destabilization of Bolivia from Mexico. And people were questioning this. When they would accuse him of that, he would say, no way, it's not true. But then people even within his cocalero group started turning against him to prove what he was doing. And here's a video of a phone call he had with one of the leaders of the cocaleros, telling him to stop the food from entering the cities and all this. So that's just one of the audios. The audio's long, and throughout the entire thing, he's just telling them you need to keep going, you need to keep attacking, you need to keep blocking, as they blocked us in 2002, because I don't know, he has experience with these things. So he was telling the cocaleros to just continue, and he was in the video later, because it's a 2-minute video, that someone inside kind of turned against him and sent it to the government, actually, the current government. So they displayed this, and throughout the video he says how they need to continue attacking. They will be funded, so don't worry about the money, the funding will come, because the man who was the cocalero was telling them also, oh, but we need money, we're running out, we need arms, all those things. So all of that happened. And so yes, he armed groups with dynamite, Molotov bombs. They started burning private and public property, especially in La Paz and Cochabamba. There were terrorist attacks. They tried to attack a gas storage facility, so an oil and gas storage facility, and they tried to attack it with bombs. And luckily, with dynamite. Luckily, the dynamite fell.
They destroyed the wall. They destroyed the wall, and they were getting in, but the military were guarding it. So they saved the whole. This is El Alto. It's the second biggest city in Bolivia, which is next to La Paz. And there is this huge storage facility of gasoline and gas. So their idea was to blow up that plant. But doing that, they would have killed about, I don't know, maybe 100,000 people, because the people lived right around that storage facility. So that was the biggest terrorist act that, that if it happened, it would have been just a major disaster.
And that was the city that had a lot of his supporters, no?
Yes.
Which would have been ironic.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no, because at the end, everyone turned against him. And Alto always was no to support him.
It was the last one.
Yes. It was the major one that he ordered, and they were carrying out in their own.
Yeah.
So he was willing to kill all these people.
Yeah, exactly.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, that is
exactly.
contradiction of this.
Yeah, and so luckily, it seems like they tried to still bomb, but they were not close enough, and that's. Thank God, that was
came
prevented.
in and had to kind of kill a few.
Yeah, the military.
And now we're
but they were terrorists.
Human rights and things for saving 100,000 people. Yeah, so that's how it is usually.
And so then we can move on. And so here, I just want to show a bit of what I was saying. He was, funding and sending all these arms to the cocalero groups. So they had arms of high caliber. They had bombs. The military started, really trying to pacify the country by really scrutiny, checking all the cars, checking absolutely everything, you know, stopping people. And in backpacks, they found a lot of cash. They found bombs, like homemade bombs, like that. They found that in the back of the car, actually. And then when they stopped a lot of the manifestations that were going on, where a few got killed, but not even by the military, because they were not holding lethal arms at that point, they found all, they like seized, or they discovered all of these arms. And then there's a video that, yes. So this was in Sacaba. It was one of the confrontations with the bocaleros, the armed militia.
Bien, esto es lo que estamos viendo hasta ahora. Vemos que un efectivo policial ejecutó medidas.
They had such high caliber arms that it even destroyed their bulletproof vests. So they killed police because at that point it didn't, like, the military was not allowed to use lethal arms because they tried to just, So that shows how they were very prepared and armed to really destroy and do anything. And it seems like through these studies that they're finding more and more of, it seems that most of the people that were shooting the snipers were Venezuelan or just foreigners in general that were very, you know, highly trained. So, and this is on Facebook, if you didn't notice. So the news doesn't show this, but like people that were there trying to make real news were taking this to show the world what's going on. So this brings us to the constitutional succession. Many people question how did the new president Yañez enter the presidency. So in accordance with the Article 170 of the Constitution, whoever succeeds the president goes in as the president. So as so many renounced, as well as the vice president who fled with him and such.
Wasn't she like in six?
Yes, she was. She was the second vice president of the Senate. And so as the president of the Senate, the vice president had renounced, she became the president, and then she became she was sworn in as the president of Bolivia, the interim president of Bolivia, and that was done November 12th. So Bolivia was left kind of presidentless for more than 48 hours. But, you know, she was the succession, the constitutional succession, and her main role, and the government's main role, currently the interim government's main role, is to truly call for clean, transparent elections with a new tribunal, with a new electoral process, which would truly mark transparency as the main duty. And of course, to pacify the nation, which they've been doing by, you know, sending out the military to stop these irregular armed groups, to seize the arms. They've been, you know, stopping a lot of the foreign militia that they are finding. So they're jailing them or sending them back to Venezuela or Cuba. They sent like, they also found, they sent 700 back to Cuba.
We have 700 doctors, supposedly.
Yes, doctors.
205 from those were real doctors.
Yeah.
The other 500 were unknown activity. So we think they were like, you know, more preparing everybody in how to fight, how to become, I don't know, a dictatorship, or how to lecture people, how to indoctrinate people. And,
and they weren't doing that. Like, these foreign militia, their job was to take, you know, the poor and kind of like brainwash them to make them believe what they were telling them. And luckily, nowadays, you know, in Bolivia, people have smartphones. People have, even the poorest people, they afford these, you know, they can afford these old, like, or these Chinese or Japanese, like, those smartphones, and they're aware of what's going on. They're aware of Venezuela. So even the poorest people were saying, no, we don't want to be Venezuelan. So that really helped, I think, in all of this fight, because they were not able to brainwash the people as they thought they would be able to, or at least not to the extent that they thought they'd be able to. And so President Yañez, she's currently, she appointed very efficient and effective authorities, and they are really, you know, pacifying the nation, cleaning the nation. They're finding all these very controversial affairs that were, you know, being dealt with and hidden by the previous government. And so they're diligently working towards their mission. And a lot of people also say, this is a far-right movement, all these things. They're not including the indigenous people. And actually, in Congress today, there are more indigenous people than there were with in government. There are more indigenous people and representatives than there were with Evo Morales. And this is just one of the possessions that they made. And these are typical.
There is the president dancing with the indigenous group, and so made one of them the representative of a big office.
So she's really making like a balanced representation of Bolivia and to represent, their rights and their objectives. Because at the end, Evo Morales is no longer representing any of the indigenous objectives or protecting them at all. And so this is a very nice thing to see also, because even the leader of the Ponchos Rojos, they're representing the Ponchos Rojos, which is an indigenous group, the leader, which is Condori, he ended up saluting very well Camacho, which was the leader of the Civic Committee of Santa Cruz, and Camacho was extremely active in our fight for democracy, and he really did some of the biggest strides to help the Bolivian population to regain this democracy. And so as he was doing all this activism and traveling to La Paz, he took the renounce letter to Evo Morales. He did a lot. As he did all of that, he also associated and met with the leader of the Ponchos Rojos, which is an indigenous group, and they saluted each other, and Condori said to him, "You are my brother. You are my true brother, because now I know your values, and I know that we both want a better Bolivia." And so after this, Evo Morales sent his irregular groups to burn Condori's house, to burn the indigenous leader's house. So it's extremely sad what happened, and that also shows what type of person he really was. And this brings us to truly the end, which is Bolivia today and what the future brings, the projection of Bolivia's future. So Bolivia truly proved the largest peaceful protest in modern history in the world through these 21 days of intense protests. And the country achieved to take out a dictatorial and authoritarian government through peaceful resistance, which is truly admirable from any way that you see it. And I believe that this is not only a huge achievement for Bolivia, this is a huge achievement for Latin America and the world in general, because this is not only going to bring hope for those countries that have been oppressed for so long, but it's also going to bring the morale and the motivation needed to the people of those countries to mobilize and to continue fighting until hopefully they achieve their liberty as well. And of course we see, Cuba since '59, we see Venezuela, we see Nicaragua, and we see so many other countries at risk because all the disturbances in South America today and in Latin America are caused by the socialism of the 21st century, which in my view does not represent true socialism. So I think this really will bring a new era for Latin America, and I hope so. And Bolivia has been pacified. It's still in the process of completing its pacification, and it's underway to make the new election, as they already approved the novel electoral law. And on top of that, Bolivia is more united than ever. That's something that is incredible because all the people of Bolivia are truly seeing an intense form of inclusion. And everyone's working together to really make a new future for the country, a better future, and a future led by democracy. So, thank you very much. And I wanted to just open up for any questions, a little Q&A panel, and my mom is here to also respond to any of the questions you guys want. And she was in the protests. I told her to come to Miami. Funny story, I told her, "Mom, please come, it's getting very scary, I don't want you." I was extremely worried, I couldn't focus for weeks at school. And she told me no. She told me that she had fought dictatorships before. When she was even younger than me, she was already fighting dictatorships with hunger strikes and all types of movements. And she said she would fight another one until they win. And she assured me that Bolivia would prevail. And back then I wasn't too sure because I was scared. But I'm extremely glad that indeed she was correct. So thank you, and please, yes.
Well, I'll make some comments. I think because Casey said to say something. So I will. I'm not Bolivian, I'm not South American, I'm not Latina at all. I'm from Macedonia, my family's from Macedonia. But Bolivia has become an interesting case for me to study because, you know, just like Macedonia, as I write to some other Bolivian friends that I have, you know, constitutions and referendums are only suggestions now for both of us. And then once American politicians only understand 10% of the information, they make very ignorant comments.
Absolutely.
Right? So for that, I've adopted Bolivia as a case. Because I understand it. But for me, the story of Evo Morales is like a Greek tragedy. Considering how he came into power. If you don't know the story of Evo Morales, at the beginning it was an amazing thing. Bolivia was a very divided society in terms of its race, right? The indigenous population versus those that identified as white Europeans or mestizos. And you know, the 2002 protests, right? The downfall of, well, I want to say Goni, but some people was out, right? All of these things that we learned, and then the space that opened up for Morales, it was just, he was a hero to the indigenous population. It really was amazing. And you saw the flag, I don't know if you explained it, but the indigenous flag, the ones that had the different colors kind of running down in an angle, the symbolic flag. But if you notice that in the protests against Morales, they were there. And he liked to present himself as Evo's pueblos, that he's representing these populations, but in the end, even they caught like, what's going on, buddy, right? So it's like a Greek tragedy, the way that he ended. But one thing, first of all, I think you did a great job because
Thank you very much.
it's a lot.
That's what I was trying to
It's
decide.
been busy down there. Right? It's been very busy. But you know, the divide between the East and the West of the country, right? The fact that he still, everybody knows why Evo wants to stay in power because of the coca growers. And it was used as medicine by the indigenous populations. But he's, of course, making a lot of money for nefarious activity, which is why, in my opinion, he wants to stay in power. But then he goes out and sells this message of they want to take your rights away, all the things that we've worked for, right? All the benefits that we don't, they want to take your stuff away. And I don't think they're buying it as much, but this is the narrative. This is the story that he wants to sell. And I think it's over for him because Mas worked with Agnes, right?
Exactly.
His party has
When they pass the electoral
and it's you mentioned the Mexicans with AMLO. It's no coincidence that his buddies that he offered diplomatic residency to in La Paz, and now he's in Mexico. So there's a little bit of a thing there. But you know these are big themes, and I think you do a great job. But what about the role of Almagro?
The role of Almagro.
That was
did
also
not
questionable. He didn't. He was here a few weeks ago. Well, he was here twice within 2 weeks, and I told someone to tell him a message like, you know, forget coming to fancy Miami, go to La Paz and fix your mess. Right? He supported Evo to run for a 4th term.
Absolutely.
Even though he knew that the referendum rejected him.
So he's an interesting case as well, as you mentioned, because first, as soon as he heard that Evo Morales was going to run for this 4th unconstitutional term, he made a declaration that no, it's not constitutional, that this cannot be, that this has to be banned, etc. And then he was invited to Bolivia by Evo Morales and his party. And he had a beautiful vacation in Bolivia, in which he visited even the Chapar, and he went to one of the parties, like the big ceremonies of the cocaleros, you know, he was decorated and everything. And then suddenly he made a new declaration in which he turned 180 degrees to the other side. And he said, indeed, it's his natural human right to run for a 4th term.
To change the Constitution.
And to change the Constitution.
To hack the courts.
Absolutely.
Right? Everything against democracy.
Yeah. So he, I mean, it's said that he was paid quite a hefty amount.
That's why we all assume.
Say that. It's said. That's why I'm saying that. But yes. So he's an interesting case, and at least though, with the OAS's audit of the election, at least at that point, he went back to the true discourse that follows, you know, democracy and the Constitution.
Right, clearly stated that it was a fraud, that Evo had already violated the Constitution after the referendum, that even his 3rd term was questionable, And definitely he could not be a candidate on the fourth term, so he killed him basically.
Yeah, but we were afraid because during those days that we were waiting for the OAS's report to come out, a lot of the protest discourse was also, we could not accept the OAS's report. We could not believe the OAS because we could not believe Almagro, because he changed his discourse already once. And on top of that, you know, it was remembered what happened in Venezuela. In Venezuela, same thing. The OAS audited and just accepted that Maduro was, you know, was leader. So, you know, it was a bit of a surprise even when the OAS came out with a fraud.
Who doesn't know what the OAS is, by the way?
It's the Organization of American States. So it's
the United Nations,
but
for the Americans.
Exactly.
It's from Canada to
So they try to regulate and, you know, to make sure, you know, constitutions are followed and the law is followed of the countries, but it's questionable sometimes. And what else? Please, sorry I interrupted you.
No, I just wanted to know about it all, because it's just, it was a shock to a lot of people that he supported Morales's.
Yeah, surviving, yeah.
Yeah, this is supposed to be like
That was a
this
slap.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah, we were all very, we were all.
Yeah.
And what do you tell people when they argue that it's a coup?
So that's the biggest problem, I believe, because
How could it be cool if it was illegal in the first place anyway?
exactly, and on top of that, what the military did was send a letter. There was no violence, there was no seizure of power by the military, which is a coup.
And more importantly, there was a following of the Constitution.
Exactly,
And
it was a
exactly.
constitutional succession.
Right? This was not a case where, I mean, in Egypt, the military intervened in 2008,
Exactly.
45, I don't know how old you are. In 2000, some of our memories go beyond Maduro and Evo and everything else, right? In 2011, when the Arab Spring was happening, right, 18 days of protest, that was the longest until Bolivia, right, of peaceful protest. 18 days of protest, and then Mubarak left, but the military stepped in, and then they took over, right? But in Bolivia, they basically said, we don't want this mess, we just want you to go away.
Yes, exactly.
No, the military saying we want you to go away.